Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stories from the Pack, brought to you by Wolves Fancast. Richard Hobbs here, and joining me today, it's the founding father of Wolves Fancast. Dare I say the founding father of online Wolves-based content? It's David Evans.
You know what, Rich? I love a bloody good return. This is so strange. This is like a role reversal here. I'm so used to over the years being the interviewer, and now I'm the interviewee. I'm the bridesmaid that never gets to be the bride.
I know, this is almost like your Michael Parkinson moment, isn't it? Where I'm slightly scared, but we're going to get halfway through this interview and we're going to go, so Rich, can you just tell me about your notable moments as well, please? It's like, okay, well.
Do you remember when that was the end of last season when I left and I sent that tweet saying, that's my last ever episode of Wolves Fancast? Well, that lasted, 7 months?
I was going to say, I think it has only taken us, we've done 47 so far as of time of recording. Mm-hmm. So, you've made it nearly half a century of podcast before getting dragged back into the quagmire that is Wolves Fancast. But today's a little different. We will probably touch on a little bit about Wolves at the moment. But as we are with Stories from the Pack, the main aim is to just learn a little bit more about life as a Wolves fan and how it's kind of moulded, I guess, your life in a way, and particularly starting something like Wolves Fancast and the impact it's kind of had and helped you develop as a fan. But first and foremost, I was going to say, when did being a Wolves fan start for yourself?
Look, like a lot of people, it kind of came about through my dad, basically saying, you're a Wolves fan now. Kind of, that's it, only choice. I remember as a kid, like, supporting England first. I never really had a team choice. I remember watching, it must have been like an early England friendly, wearing an England top. But yeah, and then it just came from that. It was just like, you're a Wolves fan now? All right, okay, yeah, fine, that's it. And that was it, really. It just came from parent heritage, as it were.
Yeah, it just was so fascinating me how few people genuinely have a choice about being a football fan.
Yeah.
or what team you're supporter of,
Yeah, I guess as a kid, you don't question it as much unless you have friends who support a certain team and they kind of bug you about it, then you decide to be a supporter of that team. Usually it's just, all right, okay, yeah, go on then.
I think especially for like a one club town/city as well, that it's, well, you support Wolves. This is,
that's it.
Even if your parents or your relatives aren't major football fans, but you kind of find a love for it. Well, they're the team who are nearest to me. The stadium's a bus ride away. What were your sort of first initial memories of Wolves in terms of, I guess, sort of games? Do you remember your first game, or even, for me, my first memory, I can't remember what game I went to, but I remember the kit.
Yeah, so I don't remember. I've got vague memories of going to my first game. I was with my dad and my uncle. I'm going to say my uncle. Might just mean my dad's friend. I don't know. I don't know, it's your uncle. All right, okay, it's my uncle.
Does your dad have a brother when you say this?
we were in, all I remember, I think we were in the Billy Wright upper on the right-hand side. And my memory says we played Southend at home and we lost 1-0. Now, when I've gone through the record books, that game doesn't exist. So, but it could have been any score. I know we lost, but I don't know who it was. So after that, the next game I properly remember was a 2-2 draw at home with Barnsley. I was so excited because I never had a season ticket. It was very much go to a game when we could afford to get a ticket. So I obviously, like a lot of people of my age then, obviously I idolised Steve Bull. So to see Steve Bull play in the flesh was a thrill for me. So when he scored, which was the most jammiest goal as well, I think he had a shot outside the box, which deflected off a player, which very, very slowly rolled into the net to the point where I'm just surprised no one tried to kick it away. All the crowd was like, come on, just get over the line, yes. So I was like obviously ecstatic when he scored. And then kit-wise, the Tyre Mark kit was my first kit.
Okay.
Memories, it was my, I'm going to say 5th or 6th birthday, and that was my main present, having the full kit and playing football in the garden on a really nice kind of sunny spring day. Only years later do people tell you it was the worst kit of all time. Yeah. But I love that kit. I still love it now, because it was my first kit, but no, If I actually remember to do it, I do want to still go out and buy that retro shirt to have it.
I was very lucky that first kit I remember it would have been when I was 5, so it was a 97-98 kit.
Okay.
And it was the very iconic one with the Wolves almost all overlapping with one another.
Oh, yeah.
Which sort of managed to stand the test of time, surprisingly. But I was going to say, you mentioned about getting kits for birthdays, and, I reckon probably a good 5 to 10 years in a row, consistently, I got a Wolves kit of some form or another, or complete shorts and socks as well. Now, here's a question. I'm only asking this, and you know what? I'm going to give you a plug because you know what? I'm allowed to. But Dave does now do a podcast called A Daft Question. So my question for you is, if you were gifting somebody a kit now, would you wrap it as 3 individual presents, so shirt in one, socks in another, and shorts in another, or would you wrap it all in one present?
It's a good question.
I appreciate this isn't in the running order.
No. Does it? I'm going to have to ask a question back to the question. Does it depend on the age?
Ooh, maybe.
Because I would say if it's a kid, I'd wrap it in separate because it's more presents, and you can get away with that. Oh, you got more presents. If it was an adult, you just bung it in one. There you go.
True. I mean, I'd be interested how many 20-somethings, let's say, are buying a full Wolves kit.
It's quite funny actually with kits because I've almost gone slightly complete opposite now with wearing football shirts. I very rarely wear a Wolves shirt, or I very, very rarely buy a new Wolves shirt. And in previous jobs, when people obviously knew I did the podcast, it's funny when you do. We'll probably talk about it later. When you do a podcast like Wolves Fancast and you run it, people think that your life is 24/7 Wolves. That's the only thing you think about 24/7.
Yeah.
So when people want to get you a gift of some kind, they go, "Oh, I'll get you a Wolves gift," and you're like, "I do talk about other things, you know." So I went through a period where. If it was either a birthday or something at work, or I'd left a job to go somewhere else, the gift I would get would be a Wolves shirt, which I start opening up going, oh, this is really nice. But they'd put Fancast 1 on the back. And I always think to myself, I'm not going to wear that in public.
No.
As nice as it is, and as horrible as it sounds, because I'm not, obviously very kind for the present. I like, oh, thanks. In my head, I'm not going to wear this.
You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have. Yeah. You really shouldn't have.
I'm not going to be walking down Molyneux with Fancast 1.
No, you're on a very steep hill going down to wearing Pleasure Dome 69.
Yes.
It's the pathway, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll move off shirts in a minute, but the last one is in terms of, I guess, did you ever have name and number on the back? Because I went through a stage where I kept switching. So sometimes I have my first name. I have no idea why in hindsight. Sometimes I have my last name and I'd switch up the numbers, but it wasn't in relation to like my birthday. It was like whatever number I was wearing for my Sunday league team at the time.
Yeah.
Were you a number on the back, whether it was a player or just I think, Evans?
Yeah, I think I always had Evans, and it was always number 9 because of Paul. I don't think I ever went down a different path. Or I might have maybe had Bull one year, I don't remember, but I definitely always had Evans and 9 on there.
I can tell you, this price is a lot about my footballing position. I never had number 9 on the back of mine. I had number 8, number 15, number 12, number 6.
15's a good one. I had number 15 was my number in my junior football team. Your neck of the woods now, Shifnal Europeans.
Oh, okay.
I remember my dad knew the assistant head coach of that team, and that's how I got to join it. And even as a kid, I was, maybe 9 or 10, I was like, why is it called Europeans? Like, I've never heard of that as a football team name. They must be the only team, Europeans.
I was going to say, if the football lexicons, last names for football teams, I'd struggle.
Add that to the, what was it? What program was that on? Was it Jasper Carrot and... somebody what was that program where they had to go through all the football team second names? I remember it as a kid, but Jasper Carrot was in it. But they never had Europeans, basically. So
No.
add that to the list.
No, we'll have to add it on. I mean, moving forward, I mean, you mentioned sort of you weren't necessarily a season ticket holder growing up. You know, you sort of went to games regularly enough. Sort of, how did your match day routine change? Because I feel it's something that it's almost in the fabric of being a fan in terms of how we kind of soak in games, especially when we're younger. So how did it sort of change for you, I guess, going from, you know, the first sort of few times you went against Southend?
Yeah, or maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Could be in Southampton. Just name a team. And sort of move going forward, I guess.
I think when I was a kid, it was very much get there earlier, get a program. Always had to get a program because obviously I didn't go very much. It was a token thing to do.
Yeah.
And then just kind of maybe get something to eat outside before the game, and then get in. I think, you know, you learn when you're older, there's no point in turning up very early to a game because you just kind of sit in there.
I used to get there at 2:00. No idea why.
But I used to like, as a kid, I used to like get in there, soaking it all in, going through the program, and then go through the match. I remember once when we played Barcelona at home in that pre-season friendly. I remember at the end of the game, I got like a jumbo long hot dog, and I kid you not, that it literally lasted me the afternoon. I think my dad didn't anticipate how slow I was going to eat this hot dog. I remember getting home, and I still had a quarter of it left.
Still had some left.
Yeah, but yeah, and then obviously when I go to, you know, obviously when I go to games now, it's just very much the case of kind of just getting there at a reasonable time, not too late, so that you can actually just get in and enjoy the game. I mean, program-wise, has kind of gone out the window now, sadly. And I always feel bad for people who sell programs because it's such a lot of work goes into that from the club who put that together. And I know obviously they've moved to a lot more of a digital aspect now to try and accommodate that. But yeah, I mean, programs kind of gone out the window for me now, sadly, and it's just kind of get there, enjoy the game, and get home. I've never been one for kind of going to the pub afterwards. You know, if there's people I know who are out to go for a drink for, great, but usually it's just, right, game's over, thanks very much, everyone, bye, I'll see you later. Yeah,
no, I was going to say, I'm weirdly, I think for a lot of people, a drink around with football, it splits almost into two defined categories. You either have one before the game, or you go out for one or two afterwards. I mean, it's probably, I'm sure there's a lot of people nowadays who do both ways round, and it's, you know, it's an all day thing. But, you know, I feel it's interesting that, I guess, with the sort of drinking culture around football, that, let's say, like, I was never, you know, I'd be straight onto Waterloo Road, get to the bus stop as quickly as I could, because, you know, the number 5 notoriously would be a single decker bus on 5 o'clock on a Saturday, which would always frustrate me. I mean, well, you know, hang on, I could just go into town for, you know, just go Mackey's for an hour, have dinner, and then it's calm. But, you know, I think programs are an interesting one. It seems to be a shame in a way that bit of nostalgia's kind of gone in a way. I think the last program I would have had was for the semi-final against Watford, and it is like
in the bin.
Pretty much, it is almost in hiding. It's you know, it's it's a tough one to look at, I guess. But it sort of nicely brings me on to sort of the next point for me in terms of, I guess, your best and worst moments, I guess, of being a Wolves fan. You know, obviously over the past 20 years, there's been a few ups and downs. I guess either as a single moment, it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, well, you know, playoff final, let's say, because I feel that's almost a very much staple one. But I guess anything sort of around it as well, and around that occasion, any occasion really, in terms of best moment.
Yeah, because I think when I was looking at this, I was trying to not go for the obvious, because look, you know, any kind of game where you win promotion or it's a massive moment is always going to be top.
Dave's unpopular opinion, the playoff final was probably Wolves' most iconic game.
Yeah, it wasn't a great game, was it? It was a very boring game, that playoff. It was caught one-sided, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was looking at some kind of big games, and for me, it's obviously different stories behind it. So I remember the 1-0 against Man United in 03-04 with Kenny Miller scoring the winner, just because I remember being at home watching it. and having to order it on Sky box office when you had to order games for that. And it was like a tenner, and my dad was moaning, thinking, "Oh, why am I paying a tenner for this?" And I'm feeling very smug with myself when we won, and justifying that £10. There's other thing, like when we beat Man City at home 2-1 under McCarthy when Milias Edwards scored. I went to that game, and it just for me felt like the first proper scalp that we had in the Premier League. I know we'd beaten Spurs the season beforehand away, but because Man City were just starting to become this Galactico side at the time, they had people like
Balotelli playing.
Balotelli, Adebayor, David Silva were in there, Joe Hart. You know, they were starting to become the team that we're about to become at that point. So that was a really good moment to see that win. Two different stories. Again, not at the game, just because I've got two random stories for them. Funny enough, I say we don't. Well, I'm not counting promotion games, but when we beat QPR 1-0 to go up, I was working at Beacon Radio on the sports show, which was covering the game, and then I was like, basically, my job when I was there was just editing all the highlights. So the live highlights would come in, and I would edit them ready for the show. And when I was nervously just sitting there listening, waiting for the final whistle to go for this game, and when the final whistle went, I just did this massive cheer in the office. Quickly realised with all the other 8 people who were there, I was the only one who cheered because I was the only Wolves fan. And I just quickly went, okay, carry on working.
Back to the edit.
So yeah, and that was a great day because obviously when I left the studio, the atmosphere down the Tetnall Road with all the cars coming back from the game, all the horns buzzing, flags out the window, car windows. It was great. And then, strangely, just because of what the euphoria was afterwards, the 3-2 against Blackburn, where we lost, but we stayed up. Again, working at Beacon Radio, but this time I was actually doing the desk itself and talking to the commentators in the studio while they were doing it. And it was my job, because obviously goals were flying in and Spurs scored against Birmingham last minute. It was my job to constantly update the table as it was in the studio and feed that back to the commentator.
Dave, I'm scared for you because I know you're great at many things, but you're not necessarily a numbers person.
No. So I to update the table. This was the time when BBC Sports loading speeds wasn't very good, and you'd refresh the page and nothing would happen. So I was trying to figure out the table, then quickly figure out the table to see if we were safe, were we in the relegation zone, and feed you back to the commentator. And I remember the commentator mentioning on there, we've got David in the studio figuring it out. He's the Carol Vorderman of Beacon Radio. So that's my claim to fame. I'm the Carol Vorderman of Beacon Radio. And the other one really is more recent history, the game against Besiktas away.
Yeah.
Again, wasn't there. There's a common theme here. But the other thing I was going to...
I think you've hit upon a really important note. I think about being a fan, and it's something that, I'm going to get on my soapbox now because, despite being an interview about you, I feel like I get the opportunity to say what I like.
It's what really grinds Richard's gears time.
Exactly. But you've hit upon something interesting for me. And I mean, it's like, I know you're as big of a Wolves fan as anyone, but there are more people who don't go to Wolves games than do. And I feel it often gets overlooked in terms of being a fan. And I think particularly around lockdown, I appreciate that, you don't necessarily center your life around Wolves. But, it's interesting to me that, the Besiktas games are a really vital one for me. And I remember celebrating that as much as I've probably celebrated any goal.
But it's an interesting one, though, because, there's always this debate, isn't there, if somebody's more than a fan than somebody else. But then, look, people who spend the money and go to all the away games, go to all the home games, very fair play to you. That's very much dedication. But is that greater than somebody who lives on the other side of the world who purposely gets up at 3:00 in the morning maybe having to listen to the radio just to listen to that game? Is that not just dedication? I know that's up to debate, but I just think anyone who supports a team and tries to follow them in any way is just as much dedicated as anybody else.
Yeah, I think I think so long as you are actively following that team, however you choose to explore that passion, I guess. There's some people who, structure their lives and jobs around supporting a team, their family commitments as well. And, I don't. If I could watch Wolves all of the time, I'd love to. But I also understand there are a million other one things going on in life sometimes, and I think sometimes those moments make things more. And I think particularly the playoff final one. I think I interviewed when we did the interview with Christian Thomas. He didn't go, but he talked about how the atmosphere in the city was. And I think sometimes being a fan doesn't necessarily mean going to games, but it's how you make the most of it. Sometimes Besiktas is a great example because it was this, wonderful European night that a handful of Wolves fans essentially got to experience in the grand scheme of things. But we all lived that body goal like we were at Molineux or like we were in Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, with that game for me, it was at my dad's because my dad had BT Sport and I didn't. So we're like, right, okay, any away game, I'll come round yours and we'll watch the game. And as the game started, I just remember sitting there thinking, I'm watching Wolves in the Europa League away to Besiktas. This just isn't real. I just remember, as a kid, you think something like this, you would hope something like this would happen in your lifetime, but you just kind of think, no, because Wolves are very much just a high-end championship team but could never get over the threshold. You just thought, this isn't going to happen. You play Football Manager, you win everything you can with Wolves, but you just think it's just a fantasy. So when I'm sitting there with my dad and watching this game, I'm just thinking, I was just more happy in that moment, thinking, me and my dad would watch games all the time. We would go through all the ups and downs of following the team, but never in our wildest dreams did I think I'd be sitting here with my dad watching this, a big European team away. And then the icing on the cake when Bolly scores right at the end and me and my dad are jumping up, celebrating. It was just a fantastic memory. And I just think, hopefully we can get European football back at some point, but I think we'll learn as the years go on, as a fan base, we'll actually savour that season in so many different ways.
No, definitely. I think for those, when we were almost following the initial stages and we kind of, even beating Torino to qualify through groups and how huge that was.
Yeah.
And then, it was a shame Bratislava, they couldn't take fans there because that would have been a great outing. And, I didn't go to any of the European games, so I can't really say, but they are iconic games in the club's history. And I think one of the, I mentioned all the stuff about, you're just as big as fans, you don't go to games or whatever, and that there's the scales are actually quite heavily tipped to people who don't go. But I think it's interesting, I guess, the reaction when we're in lockdown, or they restarted the season, and we had the Olympiacos game, and we had the game against Seville. And it did feel a very different atmosphere that, for yourself, let's say, you watched it with your dad, or you go down and watch it with a pub with your mates, or, it's that shared experience that don't necessarily, we might have missed out on those couple of, even if we weren't able to go to, I was going to say Olympiacos, we missed out on that. But
yeah, but and on that, any bad memories? Of course, a lot of them. To me, a lot of them for me were just every single playoff semi-final defeat as a kid.
So,
every year.
Let's change the question. What was your worst playoff semi-final defeat?
I don't know which one it was because we always just seemed to rotate between Bolton and Crystal Palace in the semi-final. So it was one of the Crystal Palaces. I'm gonna say we won the first leg. I'm not sure. We always seem to win the first leg and just screw it up in the second leg. But again, it wasn't on the telly, I don't think, the second leg. And I was listening to it on the radio, and I just remember being in my mum and dad's house as a kid in the kitchen, listening to the radio. We were losing. I think if we scored, we might have gone through on away goals. I'm not sure. But as it went deeper into the game, you knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I remember I was wearing my Wolves shirt, and I was sobbing my eyes out I was holding my Wolves badge, and I remember I was like, "Come on, Wolves, come on!" I was sobbing my eyes out. My mum was taking pity on me for it, but it was that kind of thing as a kid, thinking, "Oh, we're always so close, and we can never get over the line." And I think it was even as a kid that realization of, I can see for another 15 minutes, nothing's going to change into this. We're still going to lose another playoff game, and I think that was, it was that even as a kid knowing that. When is it going to happen? Like, when are we ever going to break through this cycle? And that's why, again, the playoff final, when it happened, when we won, I almost still couldn't believe we won because it was so un-Wolves to do. Not only to win a playoff, but to win it in such commanding style. It was like, you're not Wolves. This isn't the Wolves I know.
It was weird when you think about it, that, say, we'd been the nearly men so many times, but only at the semi-final stage. It's not like we we got through to the final and we kept losing in the final, and almost that one-off game was our undoing. It was these double bloody fixtures, which is, I was going to say somewhat even worse in a way. But, I think for a generation of fans, that psyche, of a playoff semi-final is genuinely something that strikes fear into a lot of fans.
And I think that kind of psyche has bled into us as we've grown up for our generation. When there are games when we're 2-0 up, I know, the FA Cup semi-final aside, I think there's a lot of times where we've been up 2-0 up in a game, and you still think, got time to give this away, haven't we?
Yeah.
This is Wolves. So many times in the late 90s, we'd have games at home where we'd be winning 1-0, and we'd always give away a last-minute goal from a corner. I think those playoff defeats has bled that kind of, like you said, that psyche into us as we've got. Even though we've become a lot this season, a great side, that still bleeds through.
No, it really does. I guess it's probably the same for quite a lot of fans across the country. I bet. Well, I was going to say a lot of fans have a similar sort of thought process, but I bet when you look at it, there's around that time period anyway, I can't imagine there's many teams who had to kind of keep going through the rigmarole, so to speak. Obviously, you've got teams like Derby, probably at the moment, who'd probably feel that sort of pain, I guess. I guess sort of moving on to, I was going to say a little bit more present day, but about 10 years ago, so a fresh-faced David Evans out of university. I'm sort of leading on to sort of talking about Wolves Fancast, obviously. I guess if you could sort of inform the listeners kind of how it started, because I think, you've spoken to me before. At that point, you weren't necessarily a hugely engaged fan, so to speak.
Yeah,
so sort of, I was the same coming out of. I mean, I went away for university and I just dropped off for the most part.
It's funny that a lot of people I speak to who, when they go to uni, they do just drop off completely. I think I did an interview, one of the first media series episodes I did, when we did one with Tim Spears. He was the same. He was like, went to uni, just Wolves went out of the picture. Yeah. Uni life, going out drinking was very much in the picture. Fancast wise, because it's funny because when I used to, even recently, when I was doing Fancast, people ask you, well, how long are you doing Fancast for? And you say 13 years. And they go, oh, I thought you've only been around for like a couple of years. I remember when Jake was on the show, and when he joined, I was like, how did you know about Fancast? I was like, I just saw it online. I thought you'd been going for like a couple of years. And I was like, oh, you're young, you are. You are young, aren't you? So Fancast started in originally 2007. I was at university, and I was in my last year of uni. Again, I would call myself a bit of a Laps fan. Kind of knew what was going on, but not really. Before university, my last year of sixth form was the Hoddle season, and Wolves had gone off the radar for me. I watched 5 minutes of a Hoddle game, thought I'm going to turn this off. Didn't realise years later how that was kind of a consensus for all the fans in the Hoddle era about the play of football. So I was in last year of uni, and I was in a lecture, and the lecturer read out kind of an email from this company called footballfancast.com, who were looking for podcasts for individual teams for the website. And I was doing the classic, what you call Mickey Mouse course, the media and comms course at uni. And I was trying to pick up any kind of experience I could outside of university. I really wanted to get into the radio producing. I didn't really want to be in front of the mic. I wanted to be the person that was putting the shows together. So any experience I could get was great. So so I kind of applied and then met Adam Thompson and Vinnie Banks, who were at the same uni doing the same courses. And then for about 7 months, we did what was called Wolves Football Fancast at the time. Monday morning, used to get to the uni, go in the media suite, record the show on a mini disc, of all things.
Wow.
Then we had to go into the editing suite. It had to go into a machine, and the show had to render, and it took ages. So we'd then go outside the uni building, like the newer uni building now by, where would you call it? Like, you know, where Royal London is.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Opposite, there used to be, I think it's still there, like a greasy spoon cafe called Jay's Cafe, which would do a full English and a cup of tea for £3.50.
Wonderful.
It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So you used to eat that, go back and get the show, put it online. So we did that, and it was really good. We had a really good laugh with it. And then at the end of uni, me and Adam had finished. Vinny was still doing uni. We tried to carry it on. I think in the 6 months afterwards, we probably did about 5 or 6 shows. Like, me and Adam were working. Vinny was obviously in his last year. We just never had the time to do it. So we just kind of paused it, really, just left it. And then about 18 months later, I was then volunteering, as I mentioned, on the sports show on Beacon Radio, and Adam was there as well. And we just got talking, and we said, why don't we try and start it up again? And we did, and then history follows 10 years later.
I was going to say, the interesting thing is, I guess for date, because you say it was sort of 2007 when it technically started, because that's sort of early for podcasts.
Yeah, so...
I mean, obviously, you know, 3-4 years down the line, you know, when it, I guess, properly started as a consistent format. But, you know, I say there's some very limited. I think I started listening to podcasts. I don't listen to the Fancast from the start. I will.
How dare you, Rich?
I know. I feel like this.
How dare you? Get off your own show, Rich. Get off your...
Was this the right time to admit that? I don't know. But it was only probably around 2010, 2011 where I sort of realised, actually, this is something I actually quite like. So it's interesting that, I guess, not ahead of the curve, so to speak, but actually, you know, what it felt like almost a little bit before. I mean, everyone's a podcast these days. So.
Yeah, I think it was very early stuff back then. And you try and explain, and even back then, even really 5 years ago, you try and explain what a podcast is, and people, you have to grasp the concept of it. So it was very much, I felt that Football Fancast were very early adopters. Given that football podcasts and podcasts in general have exploded so much, I'm very surprised that they abandoned the podcast model completely.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason why we became Wolves Fancast is because 2012, 2013, I think, they just abandoned the podcast model, and we were very much like, right, you can go off on your own now, guys. That's why it became Wolves Fancast then. And if you look at podcasts now, you kind of think, did you make the right choice?
No, I mean, like, in hindsight, you know, if they appreciate Wolves are Premier League or whatever, but actually if they had a podcast and a Chelsea, I think it was a Chelsea Football Fancast.
Yeah, Chelsea Fancast is still going, yeah. You know, I think us and Chelsea are the only two original ones from that stable.
You know, if you think about it, if they ran a collective of all of these with, you know, a proportion of the advertisement, etc., it's quite a powerful model. It's, you know, essentially the Athletics audio.
Yeah,
template.
it's strange because podcasts went through kind of peaks and troughs of popularity, and they kind of, I think maybe around 2015 they became quite popular and they waned. And it's only really been in the last, I would say, 18 months where it's just absolutely exploded. Like you know, it's a topical joke, but yeah, everybody is doing a podcast nowadays because part of it is the technology to do it is so easy to do now. It's so easier to get the technology to record it, to put it together, to edit it, to put it online. Whereas even maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was probably a bit of a science.
Well, I mean, we used to sort of it almost felt like almost a hidden art, doesn't it? You know, well, hang on, I think podcast always used to be described as an online radio show.
Yeah.
Which it is, but it isn't. It is a very structured, recorded conversation. Is the easiest way of putting it for night.
I just couldn't get for years, because we were literally the only Wolves podcast for years, and I just couldn't understand how no one else had done it. To the point I was like, guys, seriously, it's not that hard to do this. Why has no one done it?
I remember that there was probably a point, I think, I mean, the timings might be there or thereabouts. I think the Express and Star started theirs. Was it the year? I think it was the year Ferguson took over, was when they started. I think. So that would have been like 2016, 17, maybe.
Because they did a version with Tim Nash and a couple of other guys there very briefly. They stopped again. Yeah. And then the version, obviously, the Wolves Poddy now with Judar started is the one that probably started along. Because didn't you go to Express and Star, do a video piece?
I did. I do hit the nail on the head that there was a significant point where we're the only ones, and then Wolves Poddy, and probably in the space of about 3 years after that, the amount of Wolves content creators has grown exponentially, and there'd always be a new one kind of pop through doing something slightly different. You've got the likes of Talking Wolves now, you've got Finners on YouTube as well, and Wolf Whistle, all kind of, Wolf Whistle's very much different to the other two. And I remember sort of, we'd see something on Twitter, be like, new Wolves podcast, bringing something fresh, and we'd always go, oh, another one. Well, yeah. Like, I'm surprised it's in a way, leave a name, clues we know about being a fan cast. We're not the only Wolves fans out there. Other people, I don't know why other people aren't recording their thoughts in a way.
Yeah, and I think it's quite what we've got now in the communities. We've now got a proper plethora of content creators, and people have got their own mass in where they do it. I think, like things like Talking Wolves on YouTube, I think they very much own that space. But you've got people like Desmond Dave as well, who's doing a lot of kind of unique stuff on his as well, in terms of he does like a post-match kind of live phone in where people can zoom in, which I don't think anybody else is doing. And I think each podcast itself has its own unique take of how they do it, although in essence we're all doing the same thing. But I think what's quite good about that is, all of the shows have its own tone and will appeal to different types of fans, which means that there will be a show out there for you that will be more attuned to you. We were the only ones on the block, and there were a lot of people who and still didn't like what Wolves Fancast did. But it now means that there are other shows out there that people can listen to, because perhaps another show is more in tune to what they want to listen to, or Wolves Fancast is more in tune to the style that Wolves Fancast do is more in tune to what they do. So I think it is good. I think my only thing with Wolves Podcasts is, if you were listening and thinking about starting one up yourself, try and come to the party with a different take, because in essence everybody's doing the same thing. Apart from Wolf Whistle, everyone is doing the same thing. Let's review the match. Let's preview the match. If you're going to do one, try and do something new. Try and have a different take on it. And that, I think, is, again, I'm not trying to kind of self-big up Wolves Fancast in an interview from Wolves Fancast in this podcast. One of the things that I always enjoy doing Wolves Fancast, and what you guys are continuing to do, is the variety of stuff that Wolves Fancast do. It is not just a every game podcast reviewing it. There are a whole plethora of topics within the Wolves kind of history that the show covers and tries to do, or tries to push out and covers different topics. So when you listen to the show, you know that you are getting, for free, you are getting a very rich tapestry of podcasts to listen to.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my sales plug, Rich.
I was going to say,
go download, everybody.
Could you put that into a 5-star review on iTunes?
Yeah,
but no, you again, sort of, there's 1,000 Fancast memories we could, chew the fat on, from a couple of very swanky corporate days out. From I was going to say, but we could go through little bits and bobs about orange squash. But I'll keep it in terms of content wise for a couple, but we've got a really good vein of form in terms of interviewing players, either the Fancast for a period of time before they came slightly too big for us, to be honest. And that's no sort of too disrespect to a club. Sort of, it's slightly understandable. But I know, I guess, even from the early days up till about 2017, we kind of, and you majoritively got the opportunity to sort of speak to a number of players. Any sort of notable memories from that?
Yeah, so look, the first ever one we did, proper interview, was with my true love, Bjorn Sigurdarsson.
Yeah.
Which was a YouTube interview. First video we ever did. I wish I still had that.
The old YouTube channel.
The old YouTube before someone hacked it and deleted all that videos.
Yeah. Which I was going to say, minor plug halfway through most of the way through the show. Please do feel to check out our new YouTube channel, which we are now on 600 plus subscribers. Lots of great content, blah, blah, blah.
Do I need to do one of those things where I go across the screen here and say, are you going to edit that in afterwards?
David, you know me far too well. I'm far too lazy for any of that shenanigans.
So Bjorn Sigurdarsson, because he was great, because the club were very kind at the time to give us that opportunity. I think we'd just been relegated to League One. I had asked the club just on the off cuff, Paul Berry, who's head of media there, just saying, look, is there a friend of the show? Yeah, can we interview someone? He was he said, look, yeah, give me a name and I'll see what I can do. So I mentioned Bjorn. He was like, yeah, that's fine. We'll get that sorted. And I think that was, I think I personally owe Paul a lot of thanks, because I think he took a punt on us in giving us an interview. Somebody he didn't really know. He let somebody turn up to interview a player with a camera. Anything could have happened. We weren't a media organisation. But I very much went into it going, no, I'm being given an opportunity here. I'm going to do this in our way to try and make it entertaining, but professionally done. I'm not going to piss about, basically. And I hope that because of the opportunities we got afterwards, that faith was repaid. But Bjorn was great. Bjorn just kind of, he got our sense of humour. He got the interview. We asked him absolutely daft questions, ironically. I remember some of the questions I think we did this thing which no one else had done before, where we just basically asked people on Twitter, give me questions, doesn't matter what they are. They could be stupid. We'll ask them. I remember Ross Watson, he used to write for us, just sending us a question. I've named my car after Siggy. Ask him how that feels. So we asked him that question. He didn't know how to take the answer to that question. And that's why the interview kind of went so well. But Siggy was good. Jack Price was always a good interview.
Yeah.
He's so down to earth, so funny. And what was good about Jack as well, he'd always ask you questions in the interview. It wasn't just that not freaked me out. That sounds too harsh. But when we did the 300th show, and we did it with Cody and Burgoyne, I think we're talking about favourite films, and all of a sudden he says, "So what's yours then?" I don't know. What's your favourite film? My favourite film was your favourite film. But
what's your answer?
But he was really good. I'm trying to think who else we interviewed. Scott Goldball was good. But that.
I think it surprises me how. I mean, obviously they're human beings like the rest of us, but I guess throughout a period of essentially the jacket reign, pretty much all the players we interviewed played under Kenny Jackett, whether they signed under McCarthy or whoever. How just normal they were. Dave Edwards. I remember sort of joking about, his football. He was actively joking about his football manager stats to us. He, done silly things for us in the off season in terms of like how many spoons he's got in his kitchen, and he's going, they're just really normal, down to earth guys, and I think they hopefully sort of picked up that we were relatively normal ourselves. Yeah,
and I think that's how I used to try and approach interviews, because I was thinking, when I came into it, I was thinking, well, they've probably had a million interviews. Do they want to be asked the same question over and over? So I tried to come at it at a different angle to try and almost let their guard down to a point where they knew they could feel comfortable just being themselves a bit, or just having a bit of a laugh, but not to the point where I was almost taking the piss, as it were. And I think that's why our style throughout the podcast we were doing perpetuated well with the interviews. Like the 300th one, when, I took a risk and it worked, when there was that image, a little clip going around from one of the games that obviously Wolves kept winning, of Cody and Nuno hugging a slow motion. And the first question I said to Cody was like, "All right, okay, no, thanks for being on the show, Cody. So can you let me know when you and Nuno are going to get an apartment together, because you obviously get on so well?" And instantly, like, Jack and Harry just like pissed themselves laughing. Cody's like, "What the hell is going on?" I think he even says something to Paul Berry like, Can you tell me again what I'm doing here? But it really works. I think he got the joke, and we just had a great time. And I think that was our style, was to try and just, ask the serious questions, but also just have a bit of a relaxed chat as well.
So I guess my final question in terms of interviews and sort of fancast, I guess, who, during, I guess, your time as part of a fancast, who would you have liked to interview, and why is the answer Andrea Belotti?
Oh, could you imagine if we'd done the Andrea Belotti interview? That was great.
After that email.
So, shall I tell this story? Because we said it on the live show. If people listen,
I think enough time's passed.
Yeah. So I think the live show is still available to listen to pay for. So money goes to mine. So go download it. So this is a strange one, because we only got told half the story a few months after it happened. So we started to notice that Andrea Belotti was in the background of every picture of Walter Zenga, like this kind of mysterious figure.
It was ominous. He was he was in the dugout. He was in the training pitch, press everywhere. He was his shadow.
Yeah. And he was general manager, but no one actually knew what that meant, and it was never described what he did. And I think, was it that we talked
a show after him?
Yeah, we talked about it on the show, didn't we? We had a joke about it. We had a joke about whether he was actually behind my door, the door behind me in the
show might have been called something like Booty Call or something really immature from memory.
So we did that, and I think we also found on his Instagram, that he was like an amateur DJ, and he used to do sets in Ibiza or something like that. So we did the show, and I did all the usual social stuff at the time. And on the Instagram one, I'd copied his tag on for the show. A couple of days later, Paul Berry emails me. I see Paul Berry, and I think the title was like Andrea Belotti episode. And I'm thinking, oh crap, what have we done? And it was just really nice email, just saying he's come to me, he's seen us on Instagram, he's asked me to listen to basically know what we're saying about it. Because obviously our broad Wolf Black Country accents, he was like, what the hell is this? So Paul listened to just kind of basically says what we said, and apparently he really enjoyed it and really thought it was quite funny. And apparently he said, right, I want to go on the show. So Paul was like, well, let's leave it a bit, but we'll arrange something. Great, Andrea Belotti on the show. And then the week after, he got sacked.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, we were going to have Andrea Belotti on the show. That would have been really good. That would have been a nice kind of... That was typical fancast for me, that type of thing. It wasn't the big star. It was us doing something organically, being a bit of an in-joke in the show and actually coming full circle.
I guess, and I almost forgot about this. And we're talking about sort of missed opportunities and little stupid things that have essentially snowballed. Mark Hamill.
Honestly, Mark Hamill would have been the ultimate, wouldn't it? That's you know what? In fact, apart from a Wolves, somebody like, actually, from a Wolves perspective, I still would have loved to have interviewed Mick McCarthy. He was a big one for me. I think I would have been too scared to interview Nuno. I just think I'd be crapping myself. Nuno seems like the kind of person that you would just say a sentence and he'd take it in the wrong way, and he'd be sitting in silence for the rest of the interview.
Yeah, I'd feel like you'd struggle to... A lot of the answers would be very trained and not necessarily in a good way.
So Nuno, where'd you keep your sources? Let me start off with that. But Mark Hamill would have been a nice one, just because for me, I felt like it would have been a nice full circle closing that chapter. Even if he came on for 5 minutes and just talked about that experience from his end, I think that would have been nice. Would that have ever happened? Not in a million years, but it would have still been very nice to have had that kind of full circle closure of that story. I mean, that story's bizarre. I'm not going to go through it again because we've been through that story a million times, but I wonder if he secretly does watch Wolves now. I hope. Well, I like to hope.
You'd be glad to know that we have got someone joining us on the Zoom call. If only.
Force choking me through the Zoom screen.
What's that you say? I guess sort of round up sort of our chat. And overall, whether it's Fancast or outside of Fancast, because I know sort of you've sort of stepped away from that side of things now, and I know from when I've not been involved in a Fancast, obviously your love of football changes. It's different because you're not having to do a certain commitment. I say different rather than kind of good or bad or whatever. But overall, what does sort of being a Wolves fan sort of mean to you if you're able to sum it up?
I think, you do a show like Fancast for so many years. It is strange stepping outside of it. I don't think it's changed any kind of nervousness about watching the game or, being happy when we've won, being annoyed when we've lost, depending on the circumstances. Maybe that doesn't perpetuate as much after a game now as it did with Fancast, just because you're involved, you're constantly kind of discussing it with fellow fans all the time, whereas now it's not as much. So probably that, the annoyance doesn't probably get to me as much, but it's still there. I think being a fan of Wolves, I think what's great is that you are part of a club with a real rich history. Now, I know every fan can say that about that team, but I do think that Wolves have this real great historical story of proper ups and downs throughout the decades, and whatever part of the generation you followed or was your best period of following, there would have guaranteed been an up and down of following Wolves. And also just knowing that the club has actually made some real significance to the game, where Wolves were in the 50s, where the little things like the first games under floodlights, the fact that we basically created the European Cup, and in essence basically created the Champions League. Thank you, everybody else.
You're welcome.
And just, I think the fact that it is a one club, like you mentioned before, it is a one club city, and it is your own club, if that makes sense. It does have this. It does have a real link to the city. I think having a Molineux based in the city centre helps. And I think there is that real connection between the city of Wolverhampton and the club, which I think the club utilises very well. But yeah, I think I just feel there's a very much an attachment there because of the history, and because as well, you don't really realise how much of a kind of underground global force Wolves are as a fan base, how many fans there are around the world because of the significance of the team, especially to the periods like the 50s and the 80s, and how that spread through generations. So it's really nice to be part of.
No, I think there's something very unspoken about, I guess, the history of a football club and the weight that often carries a lot of the time. So I think it's definitely sort of something that it can be really significant for fans to say, especially for a one club town like ours, which actually has been relatively successful over the years compared to others of similar size.
Yeah.
But we'll wrap it up for today, because otherwise we could probably knock another kind of couple of hours of content out of this, which I'm not against doing, but we'll at least break it into different audio, so we can kind of get that Acast, get Acast, and get up to episode 500 that 1 minute more quicker. But thank you very much for joining us, Dave. It's great to have you back on for this special appearance, and
No, thank you very much for having on. It's been, I'm very proud of the work that's continuing with Fancast, and it's going from strength to strength. And I think when I started this show years ago, I think that's what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to be a legacy that could carry on through different generations. And I think the fact we're going to reach 500 is great, and on towards for many, many more episodes. No, but thank you very much for having me on.
No, not a problem. Hopefully, we'll be able to do something proper for our 500th. We are planning on doing a live quiz imminently. More details will be out that depending on when this goes out. So I'm just going to leave it really vague, which is what everyone wants when it comes to commitments. We're doing something at some point in time. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to work out the scheduling of this, so I'll do my little plug for the 500th, saying big thanks to everyone who's listened to pretty much any of the last half a millennium of shows. But it is a big number of podcasts, and as I mentioned, how many we've done so far this season, it doesn't take away from the effort that goes in behind the scenes from what is essentially just been a bit of a passion project from Dave and myself. I've been part of this for 7 years now, I think it is now, and it's great to sort of see that we still have a community of fans who are still kind of interested in sort of hearing what we have to say, and for those who are sort of still joining us and continue to join us, we always will welcome you with open arms, and hopefully when this lovely pandemic blows over, we can actually see everyone in person again.
Yes, exactly.